This is an interesting anniversary for me. 60 years ago, probably today, I had just graduated from NYU as a student in film, and I had just gotten a job that was going to start on a Monday as a assistant film editor at NBC News. I think that's the lineage of it. It gets a little vague over time. I was living in an apartment on Bank Street in New York. I had a roommate named Barry Kaplan who was there with his girlfriend and her son. um, you've all heard this story before, but I will throw it at you quickly. Barry was a very unusual person, a photographer that I met through a friend named Robert Golden in Detroit. And Barry uh, um, became friends with a lot of interesting people like Salvador Dali, et cetera. But I mean, the most interesting was probably Timothy Leary, and he would go visit Timothy Leary up in Millbrook, New York, where they would play around with this new found drug that Timothy was just beginning to become well known for, which was called LSD. And Barry said, "Bruce, you got to try this. You got to try this. It's going to change your life. It's amazing. It's incredible." And I had barely smoking marijuana at that point. But I was so intrigued by his commitment to this experiential space. And he said, "Here, let me give you a tablet of pure lysergic acid. Put it in your wallet like a condom, and when you get lucky, you'll have it. And you'll know when to take it." So I put it in my wallet, and months went by. But having graduated from NYU, knowing I was going to start work, it seemed like the pregnant moment. So I told him I'm going to take this pill tonight. Um, my apartment was already somewhat moving into, I don't know what, a kind of Buddhist environment. There was a big poster of a Buddha over my bed. I don't know exactly how it got there. Barry had told me to read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bardo Todol, that Timothy Leary and Richard Metzger and all these different people had put together, that it might help me if I do the LSD. And I had looked at the book. And and that day we were getting ready, and there was a knock at the door, and there was a guy named Michael Hollingshead who was arriving with a bottle for Timothy Leary from Sandoz Laboratories in Switzerland of this pure lysergic acid, about this big. And he didn't want to carry it around New York City on his way to go up to Millbrook, thinking God knows what would happen if it had spilled in the water supply. So he said, could he leave it in the refrigerator? And of course, Barry said, sure. And then, as you all know, I think that night I took the largest pill sitting in my wallet, and in about half an hour, 45 minutes, nothing happened at all. And Barry said, not unexpectedly, "Hey, we have this bottle of pure lysergic acid in the refrigerator. Would you like a drop?" And I said, "Well, nothing's happening with the pill. So, okay." And he goes and gets an eyedropper, and he goes to give me the drop, and the whole eyedropper, thousands and thousands of micrograms of pure lysergic acid from Switzerland, goes down my throat. That's 60 years ago, I think today. And we're sitting here right now because that happened, because an experience that is almost impossible to describe, that was timeless and endless and altering on every possible level, impacted the journey of the Bruce Rubin guy that I knew. And it announced that the world as I knew it, Bruce as I knew him, family, friends, etc., as I knew all of that, was like a tiny speck in this vastness of awareness and being and knowing and clarity and certainty and absoluteness that had literally no boundaries at all. And that not only was I in that, in some way, there was no separation between me and that. There was a long journey, and it's impossible to describe. Uh, the part that remains important and maybe resonant was that at some timeless point in the millions or billions of years that were unfolding in that journey, and the strangeness at the very beginning of it, of my first words to, I think out loud to Barry was, oh, this again, because it was not a new experience, it was ancient. And at some point where there was no being, no body, no person, no nothing, absolute emptiness and fullness and indescribable something, there was a plop, well, pop, and I can only describe the word as being, or the experience as being impregnated. And that impregnation caused something weird to happen. The totality of this Bruce as I knew it, or this space as I knew it, there was no Bruce that I anymore, went, broke in half, in quarters, and sixteenths, and 30 seconds. And it kept breaking and turning into something else. And I was the witness to this happening. And as I recall, the first thing I became aware of was like a finger appearing in the middle of it and an elbow, and then kind of like part of a wall and a bed and a floor and form. And then my whole body started to recreate itself. And then the space I had been in, and then Barry and his friend Barbara and the whole room and the whole of the world recreated itself as 65 Bank Street. And I remember being shocked beyond belief. And I looked at this world and I started roaring with laughter. Don't ask why, that's not my normal response. And then I asked to nothing and no one in particular, why am I back? And this voice, which was, I don't think from any place one could hear, spoke to me so vividly. And it said, to tell people what you saw. And then this quietude of being in me looked around and said, what did I see? And trying to figure that out, the journey of searching for what that was, in a sense, continues to this moment. But it was an unbelievable journey, unbelievable and remarkable. What the most remarkable part of it was that whatever that vastness was, it informed the journey. It said, do this, do that, in ways that were not in any way comfortable. So I was at NBC because I started my job there, and I'm working as an assistant film editor and doing things like JFK Remembered, and I forget all the different things I was working on, but the evening news with Huntley Brinkley. And something said in me, you have to go to India. You have to go find a teacher. And I went, okay, because I've been reading all the books on Tibetan Buddhism I could find, and I went, okay, I'm going to. You couldn't go to Tibet in those days because the Dalai Lama, most Tibetans had been kicked out by the Chinese and they had moved to northern India. That's where I was going to go. Friends of mine lived on an island in Greece, and they were leaving to come back to America to make enough money to live there forever. And so they said I could have their house. And I thought this would be the beginning of the journey. And I took all of my books on Tibetan Buddhism and everything else in a typewriter so I could write. And I carried it over to Greece. I had to get a donkey to get me to the house I was living in. I couldn't carry it all. And I sat in this house for 3 amazing months. I won't go into all these stories, but I realized that Greece was the beginning. And these books that I was reading were the beginning. And I sent them all back to America. And I began hitchhiking, as most of you know, around the world, kind of with the goal of going to India. But I didn't have very much money and there was no easy access. So it was kind of hitchhiking. And I began a year and a half journey across the globe and met extraordinary people, people who wanted to be my teacher and I didn't feel should be. People told me I should get as a teacher, and I thought this is not my teacher. Um, the key one in all of this, of course, was His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Too long a story, but he did offer to be my teacher, and I said, I don't think you're my teacher. I felt that because I was looking for a mystical teacher. I needed to now discover sources of mysticism. And he was not, he didn't, he was a part of Buddhism, which was not truly into the mystical nature of things as I had come to think I understood them. And so I told him, I don't think you're my teacher, but if I ever need you to be my teacher, can I come back? And he said, sure. I think just like that, sure. And as many of you know, over the course of the last 60 years, toward the end of my journey here, being now, I have come to understand that the Dalai Lama's core teaching of be kind is becoming, in many ways, the core teaching that I share. And it's from having him be my teacher for over the course of decades. But the teacher I found who would change my life drastically, as you know, was Rudy, who ran an antique store of Asian art in New York City. And I went to him with carpets from these Tibetan monks I had lived with in Kathmandu and tried to sell them, and he wasn't interested. I had met him once before because I bought a little Buddha in his store. And again, forgive me if I'm repeating these things ad nauseum, but the only Buddha I could afford in his store, this was some years before, was about 3 inches tall and it was broken. And I asked him, I was looking for a Buddha for $3, and he picked that one out. And I said, yes, but it's broken. And he said, seek perfection in yourself, not in external objects. That has been a guiding force for me from that moment. When I went back to his store, he said, what were you doing in India? I said, I went to find a teacher. And he said, did you find one? I said, no. And he quite calmly and directly said, I can teach you everything you want to know. And I knew it was true. I absolutely knew it was true. And he took me outside, sat me on a street corner, on a street right over the subway grating in 7th Avenue, where his store was, next to the Village Vanguard. And he gave me the teaching that I have shared with those of you who are now coming here as students. And it was a wonderful breathing exercise. It was transformative experience. It was direct energy transmission. And it impacted me. Those of you who remember the first class I ever went to, Rudy looked at me and I fell on the floor. Boom. Shot out of my chair because this thing called Kundalini joint shooting up my spine and knocked me over. Very instructive. Um, I had this remarkable sense of having found the person I was looking for. And that night, my friends George and Cheryl said, do you want to meet a girl? I had in Japan, the last place on my hitchhiking journey, gone into a record store and heard Jefferson Airplanes sing, don't you need somebody to love? You better find somebody to love. And I decided that was the end of my journey. I needed to find someone to love. They introduced me that night, George and Cheryl, this is days after I got back from my journey, to a girl named Blanche, who I thought was like really interesting. And those of you who know my whole story know I'm gay, so that would maybe not have been the exact choice, but I didn't specify who I was looking for. I told God to bring me someone. And this woman appeared. I went back to her house after this dinner with George and Cheryl. We sat down. I talked for 6 hours. Those of you who know me know that's not unusual. And I said to her everything I'm saying to you. And I said, I asked the universe to bring me someone to love, and they brought me you. Are you interested? She said yes, thinking I was crazy, but she didn't tell me that for years. She said yes, and we've been together ever since. We're still together right now. And it's the most amazing partnership I have ever encountered. And my entire life and everything that good has happened in my life happened from Barry Kaplan giving me LSD, meeting the Dalai Lama, meeting Rudy, having George and Cheryl introduce me to Blanche, and Blanche having the courage to make endless risky choices in life that I would never have been able to make on my own, that brought me into a life of very great fulfillment. So that whole story brings me to this moment. This moment is 60 years later. I sat and practiced my meditation dutifully every morning, my first thing after brushing my teeth and sitting down and everything was meditation. I sat in front of a photograph of Rudy or his teacher, Swami Nityananda, and I drew energy just like would from a real person. But it was amazing because it was transmitted through a photograph. And I felt this energy flowing through me and doing these amazing things, and I felt extraordinary. And for 44 years, I sat I sat regularly. And then, excuse me, one morning, and I got up and I said, I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not enlightened. I'm not, awakened. What am I doing? And I had this revelation that the I who was seeking all of that was the problem, including the I who sat down every morning and tried to get there. And so I stopped meditating. Huge choice, but 44 years is a pretty good commitment. As you know, probably what happened during that time was that I met people who were called non-dualists, who believed that there's nothing to arrive at or get to, you're already there. And I had an experience with one of them, a man named Paul Hederman, who he was giving a talk, and I just kind of disappeared during his talk. When the talk was over, I didn't come back. It was just there was just this being. There was no Bruce. I went over to him and I said, Paul, you won't believe what happened. This was amazing. He said, great, great, great. Huh. And I went over to a guy named Bart Marshall, who was conducting these groups, and told him, and he broke out sobbing. And then all these other people were sobbing. And I got on an airplane, being not Bruce anymore, and I flew back to California. And I told Blanche there was no more Bruce. And she said, well, she said, will you still love me? And I said, I will love you more than Bruce ever could. This was the beginning of trying to make a musical out of my movie Ghost. And it was very hard to be part of that process of making a musical and not be Bruce. And so something started happening, and Paul Hederman said, "You're brucing." And I went, "Oh my God, I don't want to Bruce," but it kept happening. And in fact, became one of the great lessons of my life is that non-duality doesn't include excluding Bruce. Bruce is very much part of the equation, as all of us are. There is the vastness of being, and there's the very real particular part of our being, which is got a name and a history and a story and all these things that go on as part of our life. um, the the big shift it happened in Indiana, not the big, one of the shifts of asking to become a teacher of all of this. And the Swami Chaitananda at the time, I asked him if I could teach, and as you know, I expecting to be told no and why, and he didn't say no, and he didn't say why. He just said yes, start tonight. I went, but, how do you teach? What do you? He said, just sit there. And I did, and there were 100 whatever people used to be in the class in those days. And I learned. I didn't actually learn, it happened. It just happened, and it's continuing to happen. And it is getting more and more rarefied and more powerful in a way. You may experience it in powerful terms. I experience it in the form of exquisite beauty. And there is no one who is sitting here right now with whom this vast cosmic energy that has no name, excuse me, um, is not a recipient of a direct touch, a direct embrace from that energy. Now, this is 60 years in the making, and I have been on a very long journey into, at one point, I think, knowing everything. And that's kind of an interesting place to get to, where you just know it all. I was clear. I had a conception of the totality of existence. And again, for those of you who listen to my talks in recent time, I have moved on. And I have moved on to a really fascinating moment in the spiritual journey. And that is, I have arrived at knowing nothing, nothing. The knower of stuff is just no longer separate from the known. There's just no conceptualization, nobody who owns the truth, nobody who's able to conceptualize it really that is personified. It's just, it's living presence, or another word which I talked about last week and has proven to be really interesting, the word being. And just learning to be, which is what this whole journey is about, is an extraordinary journey. For most of us, from the very beginning, it involves doing. And as I described last week, I woke up one morning and it said, I'm done, which I had never heard before, really. But I knew it was true. And I didn't know what it meant or where it led, but it meant that being is now the key ingredient. The doing progresses from being. The doing is no longer someone making things happen. The being is now all there is. And it's a very infantile state for me. I'm not walking around like a like a master of being. I am crawling into it, not even crawling yet, but I am being embraced by it, hugged by it, loved by it. And I'm learning to crawl. Being is the key word. If you hear things like being happy, it's not says doing happy. It's being happy. Being alive is different than doing alive. Be prepared is different than doing prepared. Being is really what we're all involved in right now, every one of us. The doing is part of it, but it's not the primary. The being is the primary. And surrendering to being is extraordinary when you start to realize what being is and how vast it is and how core it is to everything you are and have ever been. And so I go back to the LSD trip, which was an immense exposure to what we will call being with a capital B. There was nothing in it that was about doing. It was ripping apart every part of the person that thought they were doing and thought they were in ways separate from it, which was very scary, by the way, having them take away the doer and then present the beer, the being, and then return me to the world unexpectedly after however many eons of whatever time to become the doer again. Or at least that's how I interpreted it, that I had to do and learn the process of how to, if you will, be. But doing does take over. Do the right thing is really an act of being. Be it. The doing flows out of being. And finding your way into being at this moment in your journey, or at least in my journey, is a kind of what the mystics will call liberation or awakening. The person who is being, is one with being, is much more foundational and essential than the person who is doing. Not that the doing is a division or a separation or causing it doesn't shouldn't cause you grief, but if you can do out of being rather than do out of serving the separate persona, that imagines itself to be alone in the world, the being will release that fiction. It will allow you to find your way into a state of, we'll call it truth, but it gets it out of the conceptualized mode, out of the planning and preparing and fixing and getting everything ready for the future. It just is. It's profoundly is. And if you can find your way into the isness of your life, which you are already in, and there's nothing to do but to go, oh, then you live that. And it is an essential part of the human journey. Not everyone on this journey finds it, and therefore maybe, I don't know, you can keep coming back until you do find it, and maybe you come back even if you do find it. But the reality is, being um, is worth the journey. It is simply worth the journey. You cannot begin to understand, nor should you try to understand, how absolute and compelling being is on every level. It doesn't require your separateness. It doesn't require your doing. It uses it, and it functions for whatever purpose it has in the world of the manifested form. So it's nothing wrong with doing. There's nothing wrong with being, if you will, a separate person struggling with the realities of life. But the opportunity to move into a place of being is available to us all. Now, do you have to get to the place of being done? Well, I can't tell you that. I had to. I had to. And being done has proven to be fascinating because I am letting go of obligational stuff in my life that I don't understand. Now, a side note to that may be you all know that I was going to be writing. I was told to be writing by voices from the other side, a movie that would save the world. Part of my awareness of being was that that was part of doing, and it didn't seem to fit. And it was causing a certain amount of confusion and grief. And so I called the son and husband of this woman, Denise, who wrote the book Red Amaryllis. And I told them over a 2 hour amazing conversation that I had to move on. And I wasn't saying no in the ultimate sense because I have no idea what being will create. But in terms of doing, this is not a project I want to move forward with. This was very powerful and in many ways very liberating. And surprisingly, although Michael and Daniel, husband and son, were disturbed because they've spent years trying to get this movie written that would fulfill their mother's and wife's need in the world. They accepted this with a kind of grace that was so beautiful and endearing and open and loving that they became just more, in a way, expressions of Denise's beauty. And you know, the world has changed, as you all know, very dramatically. This war that she predicted that would happen in 2025, and she predicted this in 1980 that would cause be the seed form of the end of the world, has happened and is over. It may still be a seed form for all sorts of things, but whatever that movie might be that would stop that from happening, I have lost or cannot find my way to. I don't know what that movie is. So I have said, stepped away. I have to say, letting that need to save the world, if you will, fall away has proven an extraordinary enlightenment for me. Um, Not that I wouldn't want to save the world, but as I've said many times, and as Denise and I both agreed, save one person, you save the world. And every one of us has the same capacity, whether you write a movie or just say the right word to the right person at the right time, you can help save the world. I was in a drugstore the other day trying to get a prescription, and the woman at the counter was so wonderful. And this is something I'm learning to do. It's not learning because it's just happening. At the end of her working with me and by paying the bill, I said, "Do you have any idea how much your kindness impacts people?" And she just looked at me and broke out crying. And I didn't expect that, but I don't think anybody ever told her that. And I don't see any reason why nobody ever told her that, but because most of us don't do that. Well, the beer in me does that. The beer in me does that wherever possible. And you can learn to be that. You can be to acknowledge the beauty and the goodness and the kindness and the love that's in the world. You can do it. And I say do it not as a preparation, like I'm going to call and do it or prepare to do it. You do it because in the moment of being, it flows through you and it touches people. It changes them. It changes probably everyone else who was in line behind me. And it's like following the reality of being is more impersonal in a way and more universal than following doing, which is me and mine. If you can edge out of the doing mode, just quietly, gently listen to the voice of being. It's amazing to see the world you're living in through those eyes. You will not be unhappy. You will be relieved, but you will not be freed from the person that you are. You will be expanded into the reality that you are. It includes the person. Will things happen to that person that you like and don't like? Absolutely. Will you be ready for it? Who knows? But if being is on your agenda or if you are moving into being, I don't know any way to be more ready for life than to just be in it, to be a human being. That's the doorway to, I can't even tell you what, but I can tell you life does not deliver what exactly you want. And I have learned that over the course of time. It delivers whatever it delivers. If you're in a state of being, I hate to use the word enough, but it's kind of that word. It delivers what it delivers itself. It delivers itself to you. If you're in a state of doing, you may miss it. If you're trying to get there and plotting and doing all these different things to get there, what's the process? Because you're there. You're there. You're there. It doesn't mean it's going to be simple or feel good or make you feel safe and secure. It doesn't, I don't think it's about that. If that's what you're looking for, there are maybe religions you can go to, places of belief that you can go to that will maybe hope give you something to hold on to. But this isn't holding at all. It's not about holding. It's about letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. So I didn't expect to do my life story again today, but it's 60 years. I guess, there are moments and anniversaries in life that can be celebrated in a way that's very important. Another one is going to be on July 13th, which was a Friday the 13th, 35 years ago, and this movie Ghost opened up in the theaters. And we didn't think anybody was going to go see it, but it turned out to be the moment that changed my life on so many levels. Uh, and it is an anniversary. And it was a Friday the 13th, which changed Friday the 13th for me as a source of now a source of like good luck and wonder. Uh, Life is surprising. And little moments like that, I mean, that film was not meant to have much of a life in the world, and it changed mine. Things happen. Things happen. I don't walk around with an Oscar in my hand trying to announce myself to the world. I used to leave it in my bedroom next to my bed. My granddaughter brought it downstairs, but I walk around with something else. that has to do with thank you for bringing me the the fullness and the wholeness of a life that wasn't planned and delivering a level of simplicity and comfort that is so beautiful. And and I am thankful for these anniversary moments, every one of them. And I want to just announce them to you. And thank you for being part of my life. You guys are unbelievably meaningful. And I will tell you, today's class was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had. I do not know why, but the quality, the Beethoven-like symphonic version of what was happening today was, I don't know if you all heard it or if you felt it personally for the notes that you were striking, but trust me, you were part of an orchestra that was something extraordinary happening. And I will tell you again, if there's ever a moment in time where the universe needs your being, we're there. We're there. And if any of this talk has can help you peel away the doing, move toward the being, move toward the gratitude, look out the window and go, look at life, and you are part of this. Whatever it may be, it's got lightness and darkness, evil and good, but you are one with it. And if you can find a part of you that goes, thank you, and then you can share that with anybody else, you will have help save the world and you'll have an amazing life. Okay, I figure that's enough talk. I do love you guys, and I cannot tell you that love was palpable in everything that was happening today, and it had nothing to do with Bruce at all. You were attracting core elemental love from the center or periphery. I don't know where it was from, but boy, oh boy, you guys, not one of you escaped unloved. Not one of you. You are, I mean, you were touched. Take that love and share it. Okay. Any questions or stuff like that? Okay. Um, Let me just say, I imagine I'll be here next week. I don't see any reason not to. If you guys show up, I will be happy to see you. And I know it's a New York class. I know it's a in-person class, but at this point in time, you're all welcome. It seems like the numbers work for us. And if you want to show up, feel free. And if not, have a great weekend and enjoy yourselves. I love you so much, and I will see you the next time I see you. Ciao.